Welcome back. This is going to be a series of videos focused on having a deeper relationship with the divine, a deeper relationship with God, but in a different way, in a way that feels more aligned to who you are and not so rigid in patriarchal religious beliefs. Now, I want to start with the fact that my goal and my intention is in these videos is to not create separation. It is to not create hurt or hate or pain. That's not my intention. I love God. Hands down, love God. Every aspect of my life, I allow God in, and where I don't, I work to understand how I can. And the more I understand about the truth of stories, that were told to me in a different way, the more these truths bring forth a closer connection to God. And so what these videos are all about is uncovering hidden truths so that we can feel a closer connection to God. I like to do two things, and the two things that I like to do, and they ultimately have one point. The one point is a deep connection to God. For me, there's two ways that I go about doing this. One is through this healing/feeling experience. And it ties directly into the other, which is the mind and the logic and understanding her story, not his story, right? His story, her story. Understanding her story and understanding the stories that were never told or were kept out of the books that we were taught were the way. And so, again, my intention is just to help us come closer to the divine. So if you are very happy with where you are, I invite you to turn this off now. But if you're questioning what you believe and you really do want a closer connection to the divine, a closer connection to yourself, a closer connection to love, if you're looking to understand things or grasp things that didn't make sense or never have made sense, and you're like, gosh, what is it? There's something missing here. And I want to feel this love of God. I want to allow this love of God in. I want to, I really love Jesus. And let me be clear, I really love Jesus. My bedroom has two massive portraits of Jesus in it. If you, and for a while, and I want to honor, where everyone is in their journey. For a while, I didn't even want to be around the name of Jesus because all the pain that the church had brought me. But what I realized is that the church doesn't own Jesus. The church doesn't own Mary Magdalene. The church doesn't own the Virgin Mary. The church doesn't own any of these things. The church just claimed to own it to build power and control and fear and wealth. And so here we are, unlearning through spiritual hidden truths. And again, this is all just so that we can have a more deeper divine love and feel more aligned in our lives, have better relationships with ourselves, with our loved ones, with God. So, here we go. Okay. In my master's program, we write a lot. If you've gotten a master's, you know. All you ever do is write. So I wrote a paper and spent, I don't even know how long, studying for this paper, because in academia you cannot write something as a fact without citing it from someone who has done their research before. Okay, so it's a very laborious process that you have to really you have to spend so much time researching to ensure that what you're saying is accurate and has been researched before you. Okay, so my paper that I wrote, it was my final research paper for one of my classes. It says, a feminist viewpoint on Christian history and the healing power of Christian herstory. And we're going to go through this in series. We're going to go through this actually fairly slow because there's a lot of content here, and I'm not saying that you can't grasp all the content. I'm just saying that, it deserves time. It deserves time to sit with. It deserves time to understand how we feel about it, and it deserves time to understand the hurt and the pain that it has caused us, but then also the deeper connection that it'll bring to the divine love that exists within and around us. Okay, so this paper has 80 something sources. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, 73 sources. So a lot of sources. Because let me tell you why I wrote this paper. I love God. I love Jesus. And this story didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand why God's love was conditional. I didn't understand why God doesn't love everyone. I didn't understand why God would judge people. I didn't understand the fear and control in the church. I didn't understand why they would want people to feel bad. Like, I felt like when I felt the love of God, it felt really, really good. Like, I felt so loved and held. And remember, this is after I left the church. Okay, so this is like 2018 to 2022. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, God is so loving and caring and considerate and compassionate and just wants like me to experience love and me to share love. And like, it's all about this love. But the Christianity, the Catholicism that I grew up with it did not reflect that, right? Okay, so here we go. I don't know, I'm contemplating just reading it, and I'm hearing just reading it. Okay, so this is my introduction. The impacts of Christianity can have both negative and positive effects on people. In this paper, I argue that the patriarchal interpretations of early Christian history are detrimental to women's mental and emotional health. The inaccuracies, or rather distortions, of the early Christian movement by church fathers have been a contributing factor to women's experience of religious trauma. Within the context of this paper, the reader will understand the development of Christianity, women's involvement in the early Christ movement from female authors, and a sense of the impact of religious trauma with research-backed examples to see how these impacts women's mental and emotional well-being. In closing, I offer a perspective on religious healing trauma through education and empowerment. Okay. Whew, that's a lot. So there are many distortions in the story of Christ. As many of us already know, Jesus wasn't a Christian. Jesus was Jewish. But this early Christ movement, Jesus never called himself a Christian. In the first century, people were not calling themselves a Christian. But regardless, Jesus was bringing in a new way of living and of being, and I'm going to talk more about this. Okay, so first let's talk about the history of Christianity, and I'm going to be weaving in and out some books that I love for this. Okay, section 1, the history of Christianity. Before delving into the impacts of Christianity on women, we must first understand the development of Christianity. While some believe Christianity was an invention of the Emperor Constantine and had little to do with Jesus himself, others believe the origins and the movement started by the surviving disciple of Jesus of Nazareth. Upon strenuous research, key common threads in the development of Christianity showed Jewish and Greco-Roman influence, and the power and dominance of Constantine. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that until about the 3rd century, and I'm going to say BCE, so before the Common Era. So in academia, we say BCE, before the Common Era, and and CE, Common Era. And so in about the 3rd century, so, Christianity was everybody had their own flavor. There was a flavor, people didn't really read back in the day, so it was all stories that were told. The literacy rates were extremely low. Also, there was no such thing really as the Bible that we know today, walking around. People weren't passing them out. And so the stories that were told, they were passed on orally for the most part. And so when Constantine was a Roman emperor, he really wanted to expand Christianity. Okay? That was part of his central component, and he had a heavy influence. If you ever wonder, where did the Romans go? They went into the Catholic Church. Okay, so a central component to the establishment of what is known as modern day Christianity is said to be developed at the first council at Nicaea in 325 CE by Constantine. Okay, so let's pause for a moment here. So the Council of Nicaea was a meeting. I have it right here. The Council of Nicaea was attended by approximately 380 bishops and was considered the establishment of Christian doctrine with creed, canon, and Easter. It is stated that undoubtedly the most important result of the first council was the Nicene Creed. Okay, so that's a lot to intake. Let's break this down. Let's breathe this in. So what does this actually even mean? Maybe a couple things that jump out at you is that there was an establishment of Christmas. of Easter in 325 Common Era. That really jumped out at me. You grow up, or I grew up believing that, Jesus was born on Christmas Day, which we know is inaccurate because of what we know about the census and how the census was held in the spring. And so Jesus was not born in December, because December's not in the spring. And then to wake up and see that also Easter was created in 325 CE. And this is all documented. This is documented, written accounts of what happened at the Council of Nicaea. And the Romans, they kept their documentation. They kept their paperwork. We even know that it was 380 bishops. Yes, these bishops were all men, because what happened, and we'll get more into this, but in the time of Christ to 200, 300, women were a huge part of the Christian movement. But in the Roman Greco times, in Rome, women were completely unworthy. They were thought equal as slaves. Okay, so to have women in the Catholic Church preaching about God, and it wasn't the Catholic Church at the time, it was just Christianity in the 300s. To have women preaching about God was, absolutely not acceptable. That could not have happened. And so they were all men in around 325, it was moving to a patriarchal experience. Okay, so also at the Council of Nicaea, they created the prayer, "We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible," right, Lord, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and so forth and so on. So that's not like a prayer that Jesus created. That was the creed. The creed you could think of as kind of like an allegiance, kind of like, like the Pledge of Allegiance, like this is what we believe. And so the creed became what Christianity would be. The canon became, this is the way that it is. This is Christianity, and everything else is inaccurate. Now, up until this time, there were multiple gospels that were going around. Not just one gospel, not just the gospel Mark, Matthew, Luke, John. It's not what was in the New Testament that we know today. Okay, hold on. Let me back up, because I could barely breathe, and I know that this may be rocking some people's worlds, because it really rocked mine. To know that there's this Bible out there today that people use to condemn others and to judge others breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks my heart. Especially because, at its origin, you wonder, or I wonder, why did they pick those gospels? And we'll do more research and talk more about this. But, these gospels that they picked were the gospels that teach you that God is outside of you. And if you need an intermediary between you and God, the church, right? The priests. And if you need this intermediary between you and God, then you're giving your power away. And that's what they wanted, right? And so the gospels that they chose were the gospels that were more aligned with the belief that God is somewhere else. It's this kingdom to come. But if you really study the gospels, and it's even, there's some things that haven't been taken out of the gospels in the current New Testament that teach you that God is within you. And so these other gospels that were left out, they taught us God is inside of us. There's nowhere to go. The kingdom of God is within us. And so I'm just going to set this down here because I want us to just take a moment to see how we're feeling, to check in with how we're feeling. Because this is overwhelming to learn that, the Bible isn't something Jesus wrote. It's not something Jesus picked. It's an account of history that was chosen by men that really wanted power and control. And then we find a powerful and controlling God, right? And so God became what they wanted it to be. And that may be why, if you're struggling to understand, why don't I feel this connection with God, or why does something feel off in this connection? It may just be because the God that you've been taught to love and adorn isn't actually the God that you feel in your heart. At least that was my case. I want to honor the fear that I experienced and the fear that you may experience when we learn that something isn't true and it's the foundation of who we are. It can really rattle us. I was full into Catholicism, and all my friends were heavy Christian friends. We all believed in God and that Jesus Christ came to save us. That's a whole nother story. That's an inaccurate story as well, but we're not going to talk about that now. It's a very terrifying experience to learn that what you believe to be true is not. It can also be a very liberating experience to learn that what you believe to be true is not, because now all of the doubt, all of the fear, all of the anxiety, the depression of who you are, you can start to see a light. And let me get a little bit more real and raw with myself here. I did not agree with some of the teachings of the church, but I stayed out of fear and also out of a little bit of love because, you have a beautiful and wonderful, I had a beautiful and wonderful community. And also I was just scared to leave. I didn't know what that would mean for me or my family, or if God, I still had that really, really deep ingrained fear if God would condemn me or judge me or I wouldn't go to heaven. And so as I learned to release the fear and to embrace love, my life changed forever. And that's what my hope is as I'm telling this story. And we're going to be done with this first part here. And I'll go into another, we're only on page 3. But I really want to honor, what we could take in at one time. And honor the fear that we may be experiencing. And know that all that fear, when I was going through this, all the fear wanted was to know that, I was going to be loved and I was going to be okay and my family was going to be okay and we weren't going to go to hell. And here I am. I just want to let you know, I'm still alive. I say that jokingly, but in all seriousness, I thought that something really bad would happen to me or my family because of leaving the church. And every person in my family is better because of it. Every person in my family feels more love, joy, compassion. They feel less judgment, less fear, less anger. And I also want to honor if you're feeling angry right now, that's a very, very valid feeling when you wake up and you realize you've been lied to. Anger is a very valid feeling. So honor where you are, take a breath, take time. If this is just confirmation for you, feel that joy, feel that inspiration, feel that knowingness inside of you that's saying, I knew it. I knew something was off. And if you already knew all of this, this is just the confirmation based on academic research. And that's what I needed. I knew it in the spiritual realm. Yeah, I heard people say it on Instagram, but I went through and did massive amounts of research, massive amounts of academic research to understand, what does this even mean? Again, because the only thing that I wanted was to be closer to God, to feel more of God's love within me and around me. And that's what I want for everyone. I want everyone to experience more love and joy and happiness and compassion in their life. And what it takes is to understand, it takes that feeling aspect that I talked about at the beginning, and also the mental aspect and understanding who we are and what our beliefs are and letting go of beliefs that don't serve us anymore. So I'm wishing you all the best. In our next video series on this, we will continue. We will go through more and we will talk more about the Bible and the New Testament specifically. Have a wonderful day.